Good day, everyone, and welcome to Commsverse. This session is called Migration Scenarios, and today will be presented to you by Callum Hardy. Callum, have a wonderful session.
Thanks, Shelley. Hi, everybody. I am Callum Hardy from Exactive. My current job role is I am Head of Solutions and Pre-Sales. Here at Exactive, we were the UK's first and we are currently the oldest Microsoft GC partner. So I have the privilege of working all the way back to the start of OCS and all the way through to the current telephony, which is Teams today as we see it. The purpose of today's slide is to talk about what are the common and more complex requirements of an organisation may and may not want to migrate from when it comes to direct routing. Contrary to common belief, direct routing isn't just a commodity which can be turned on and nothing much else. It's a flexible solution that can come and work in quite a lot of different migration scenarios depending on what you have existing, and that's what we're here to talk about today. As you can see, just a list of all the sponsors we have for the brilliant event that we have today. I'll just mirror exactly what it says at the very top, which is thanks to everybody for joining and sponsoring to make this event happen. So first things first, let's strip everything right back. What is direct routing? So direct routing, simply put, it connects Microsoft Teams to the public switched telephony network, the PSTN, using Microsoft certified session border controllers. It allows a business to leverage Microsoft Teams to make and receive calls without requiring Microsoft call plan licenses or on-premise equipment, depending on what you choose going down the line. So depending on how you're migrating to Teams, this is always going to be the end goal, but it's the start goal that can always chop and change depending on the organisation. And it's that is what's important, and it's that will change the customer journey in the migration scenario. So we'll talk about the very simplest one first, and it's just what are roughly the standard requirements, what are the standard needs for direct routing and how we would want to migrate. What are we migrating from? So essentially, what I want as an organisation is I want something that has a quick setup. I don't want to be waiting weeks for something to be built, constant conversations between myself and the direct routing provider. I just want something nice, quick. I want something that is scalable. So what I mean by that is, for example, there may be a need down the line to enable another office for direct routing, or the organisation may purchase other organisations, and in which case you may need to enable another 1,000 users. That need needs to be fundamentally there before I can migrate to Microsoft Teams and direct routing. I don't really care about the interop with existing telephony. I'm going to get rid of it, so don't need to concern that. That's probably one of the key drivers behind what we're going to look at in the first part. So that's the key thing that will shape what we're going to do. So it's that part there. On a cloud first strategy, again, it's important because I don't want anything on premise. I want everything consolidated. I just want to consume a service. So that's important. I want a single consolidated bill. I don't want to go one place for SIP. I don't want to go another place for SBC support. I don't want to go another place for Skype for Business support. I don't want any of that. I just want a single consolidated bill. That's another key requirement for me for my migration. And again, I don't want any on-premise responsibility. So again, to go along with the cloud first strategy, what I mean by on-premise responsibility is depending on the size of the organisation. For example, if you had a Skype for Business estate, you would have been responsible for Windows updates, Skype for Business cumulative updates, internal certificates and public certificates. Quite a lot of things to consider there. And again, on your SBCs, you would have been capable of firmware updates and certificates, all within your control and remit. You would have had to take care of them in one way, shape or form. So the answer from this migration, if this is where you're coming from and this is your scenario, the answer for this is direct routing as a service. So like most things as a service, you'll consume it on a per something basis, whether it be per channel, per minute, per user, mostly it's going to be per user per month. Everything in the background is taken care of and you just consume the base service. Again, so you don't have that on-premise responsibility. If something fails, you don't have to do a manual failover. All of that is taken care of in the background. It's not your responsibility as such anymore. You just need to worry about the end user on the seat and how they're getting on with the client. Everything is taken care of in the background. You just consume it as a service. Very common model now in IT, and direct routing just absolutely follows that methodology. So again, what we spoke about before, what are the benefits of consuming direct service? So it is a quick setup, and it's because it's automated. Most things in direct routing is automation. It's automation driven. So it means that you can have it scalable, and it means you can have the quick setup. So if I did have the need to add another 1,000 users, I'm not going to go and have to build something somewhere else. I'm not going to have to give a 12-week lead time. It's straightforward. Give the details, enable the user. It's a very simple, straightforward process. Another benefit of consuming direct routing as a service is you could, at that point, you turn it on. Depending on where you've came from, like we said, the migration scenario might have been you're getting rid of your existing telephony solution. That is your existing migration scenario. Now, there's two choices you have to make there as an organisation. Do you want to keep the existing numbers, or do you want to have brand new numbers? Both of which are absolutely doable. It's up to yourself at which point. You may want a combination of both. You may want to port your old numbers from your existing SIP supplier onto the new direct routing platform, or you may just want to purchase brand new numbers as an organisation. It's completely up to yourself. And then the main one, which meets our main business need, is there isn't any on-prem responsibility. It's all consumed as a service. I don't care what's going on in the back end. It's not my concern. I'm not held responsible from it. I am just consuming a service. So those are the benefits of direct routing as a service. All of it meets the needs that we spoke about previously. So if we go back, all of these here, and this is your cut. If you are in this organisation and these are your needs, all of these could be met with direct routing as a service. That is it in its most basic form. There's not much complexity to it. It's a simple, straightforward service. However, you may be coming from an organisation where your migration scenario is slightly different. So what if you do need more flexible? So your migration scenario might be, you actually still do want to use direct routing, but you may have actually just signed up to your own SIP contract a few months ago, and there isn't a cancellation or a cool down period. You just need to get on with it, and you can't cancel it because there's heavy cancellation fees. What can I do if that's my scenario? What possibilities have I got there? Again, very similar to that. I have a cloud PBX that again I've just invested very heavy upfront capital costs on. What can I do? What possibilities could I have to use that along with Microsoft Teams to make the two work together? What can I do? Is a common question. For compliance reasons, I actually can't consume it on a centralized platform like Direct Routing as a Service is. I actually need to have it in my own cloud tenancy. That's the scenario I'm coming from as a customer. What can you do for me? Or depending, for example, on big massive warehouses, you may have a need to have analog devices or SIP devices registered somewhere. And some direct routing offerings don't have that. You need to create something a little bit more flexible. So what can you do around that? It's quite common that you'll have existing handsets. They might not be Teams compatible, but they might be SIP compatible. So if it's an analog, you'd use a Grandstream or something similar and set it up that way. Or if it's a SIP device, you would just register it straight away. But what can I do to actually make all this work? If this is any one of these are where I'm coming from as an organisation, and that's what I'm migrating from, but I still want to leverage Microsoft Teams direct routing. So what you would do is you would get a dedicated cloud-hosted SVC. So if you had the problem of you needed to sweat out a SIP contract, absolutely possible. All you would do is you would connect your SIP to the dedicated SBC and then create a direct routing connection to Microsoft Teams. It's a model that we typically call a bring your own SIP model. So you can plug your own SIP trunk in and use it that way. Best of both worlds. It means you're not any cancellation fees, nothing like that at all. you're leveraging Teams, and you're leveraging your existing SIP contract that you've just recently renewed. So that's a win for the organisation. What about the cloud PBX integration? Well, again, very similar to the SIP on top, like we mentioned. All you do is create a SIP trunk between your SBC and the PBX, and essentially that enables them to speak to each other. There's specific rules needed in place for them to talk accordingly, which we'll go through on a later slide, but that again enables the two to work together. So your upfront capex cost you're still keeping, and you're utilising it for maybe another couple of more years, but you're still leveraging Microsoft Teams for the specific users or departments that want to use it, and you're still not losing out on the PBX. So brilliant. Compliance reasons, tick, because you own the SBC. It's in your data center, so technically it's brought out from a centralized service, and it's brought a little bit more indoors to yourself. So again, you're winning there. The analog devices and the SIP devices, like I said, can be registered via either a grant stream or directly, and because this is your specific SBC that direct routing is enabled on, that is still proactively monitored and still proactively managed, you can still have those things done to it. You still consume it as a service, you're just getting something a little bit more personal to your organisation's need, if it's a little bit more, if you need some more flexibility. Again, there's need for some more flexibility. So what if I still need a little bit more? So for example, it's not a cloud PBX actually that I've renewed with, it's actually something on premise. Doesn't support NAT traversal. What can I do as an organisation? And again, for regulatory reasons, I actually can't have SBCs cloud hosted at all, whether it's centralised or whether it's actually my own AWS data centre. What can I do there? Or your SIP trunks actually may terminate locally on premise themselves. Well, again, very similar to before, but instead of a dedicated cloud hosted SBC, it's a managed on premise SBC. So you'd spin up a virtual SBC in your tenancy, or your data center, sorry, and everything would be intertwined and happy in there. So, for example, instead of connecting a SIP trunk between your cloud SBC and your cloud PBX, all you're doing is creating a SIP trunk between your on-premise PBX and your on-premise SBC. The call handling is all the same, which we'll go through on the next slide. And so, again, win for the organisation. For regulatory reasons, you can't have SBCs in the cloud. Well, it's now in your data center virtually. Perfect, absolute win. You tick that box. And if the SIP trunks are actually into your estate locally, again, you just connect them straight into the box. So it's a really easy win. So it really all depends. The two migration scenarios that we've just mentioned there is where the PBX is hosted. If you have a PBX, where is it hosted and can it support NAT traversal? Those are the two main things to look for from those migration scenarios, because that ultimately depends on where the SBC would be placed, whether it be cloud hosted or whether it be managed on premise. So talking about the call flow, this is at a very, very high level, how it would look. So this is a standard call flow from Teams to a PBX. I'll go back quickly. So, for example, the Teams user has recently been migrated, but they still know the extension dial of their person next door or the person in the other office. They still are used to the concept of extension dialing. That's fine, that's not a problem. So when they dial that number, it's normalised fully to 4100. The reason it's normalised is because the user may sit on Teams or it may sit on the old PBX. So which will be determined later down the line. So Teams will search for it first. If it's not a Teams user, then it will get moved straight down the line here. So as you can see, it's not a Teams user because the user we're actually calling sits on the PBX. It's 41474-100. So user calls 4100. It's normalised. The calling number will always be normalised to E164 format. They're always going to be normalised. So the call is sent to the audio codes virtual SBC, still in the following format, which is fine. Teams takes it, sends it straight on. Teams isn't doing any manipulation here whatsoever. It can go straight to the audio codes. And this is almost where the magic happens. So audio codes at this point will make a decision. Have we set up a rule in here to send this to the PBX because we know the user sits there? Or if that's not the case, can we send it out to our SIP trunk that we have here? So we know in this scenario that it's actually there's going to be a rule in place to send it on to the PBX, but PBX doesn't necessarily know what E164 format is. It's not necessarily the language it speaks. So there's a little bit of manipulation we need to do here. So essentially the call number is changed to the following format of 4100. The call-in number is changed to the following format of 4501. So we've changed E164 to shortcode 4-digit dial-in. That's how we are making the two speak to each other. So from this point on, it's sent to the PBX trunk, and then from the PBX trunk to the PBX registrar. It'll have similar rules. It will say, okay, does the person sit on a handset, or does the person not actually exist at all, and we can send it out to the ISDN. But in this case, it's a handset, and it will send it straight onto the handset. And because of the rules we've put in place earlier on, the format will actually show from 4501, in which case they know it's their end user that they used to speak over the same PBX handset, except it's now coming from a Teams user, not the PBX. So still receiving it in shortcode, they're still getting it in shortcode. So it's an absolute win for the organisation. Similarly, call flow from the PBX to Teams. So again, the PBX user calls the extension 4501 because at the end of the day, that's what the extension number really is within Teams. And the calling number is 4100. So it hits the PBX registrar. It says, no, you actually need to send this to the trunk here. It's not an ISDN, keep it internal, don't send it out. So it does that, we'll send it on then to the audio codes gateway. So its call is sent to the virtual SBC, in which case audio codes 4501, and the calling number is 4100. And at this point, again, audio codes will look, can we send it out, or should we send it on to Teams? And at which point it's going to get sent on to Teams. But before we do that, if we send it to Teams, a straight 4100 and a 4501, Teams is going to go, I have no idea what you're talking about. This is not my language I'm speaking. And essentially, this is where, again, the magic happens. It's going to transform it to E164 format, as you can see by both here, which has been done. And because the on-prem line URI parameter is set here, it's essentially what you need for direct routing, then it will match and it will call the user. So it's an absolute essential win for the organisation if you need to integrate with your existing PBX, which in some case there is a need to do. It's very unlikely that you may want to just completely move from the PBX in a few weeks. There may need to be interop over a couple of months, maybe up to a year, and this is where this kind of scenario comes in. So it's key and part of the migration for an organisation is this here. So there's one migration scenario that we've not spoken about yet, and it's quite a common one when you're talking about Teams, and that's an on-premise Microsoft UC estate, which you already have. And this is where the next slides come in. So you may have Skype for Business already, like we mentioned. Quite a common scenario, you use Skype for Business for enterprise voice. So you've probably got already existing certified, Teams certified SBCs, and your Skype for Business will also have an Edge server. So as far as you're concerned, you've got most of your kit there for your need. So your migration scenario, you might not need to do much as far as configuration is concerned, which is a great win. Because in 3 simple steps at a very high level, you need to enable AD and hybrid so you can move the user or sync users from on-premise AD to Office 365. So if you've already got Exchange Online, for example, this may already been done. So it might not even be something for you to consider. It may already been done. So that's a straightforward setup. Skype for Business will need to be placed in a hybrid mode. So basically, in essence, you're creating a connection between Skype for Business and Office 365. So that makes it a nice seamless migration for your users. So you still have the capabilities to use the voice functions kept within Skype for Business Online, Skype for Business on-premise, sorry, which is a great one. And then lastly, you need to essentially enable your existing SBCs for direct routing. So very similar to what you've done for Skype for Business on premise, you would have registered your SBCs to topology. At very high level, you're doing a similar thing in Teams. You're enabling your SBCs as an endpoint for PSTN calls within Teams, and that's what you need to do. So here, for example, you have your Standard Edition front end or Enterprise Edition, completely up to yourself. And then you also have your Skype for Business Edge server. And normally those can just go out and talk to public traffic. But here specifically, we've enabled the hybrid to Teams, which is great. And then out here on the SBC, we've also enabled the connection via direct routing to Teams as well, which is perfect. So for argument's sake, if you're talking from Skype for Business on-premise traffic, you've got your call. So a user wants to call out, they'll go to the audio codes SBC and they'll hit their existing SIP trunk. But now you've done the exact same thing for a Teams user. Your user sits on Teams. They also want to call the PSTN. They'll hit the gateway and then they'll hit the SIP provider. It's a really straightforward setup if you have Microsoft UC already, because the tools, for example, of migrating your users are already there. So once the estate is configured and looks somewhat to the above, at its simplest form, all we need to do is essentially make sure the user is licensed appropriately. So if you have an E1 or E3 SKU, for example, then you'll need to have the additional phone system license. Or if you have E5, it's already encompassed in there. You essentially need to enable users or create a PSTN usage, a voice route, very similar to Skype, and a voice routing policy instead of voice policy for Skype for Business, so essentially controlling what your users can and can't do. And then also a dial plan. So that's where kind of what you dial in, what happens to it. Does it change? So if I dial in 3333, does it manipulate to something else? That's what your dial plan is. And then last but not least, you need to enable your user that you want to enable Teams direct routing in Teams only mode. And the reason that is, if they're not in Teams only mode, then the cloud will essentially send the call back here. And it sends the call. If an incoming call, we'll send it to Skype for Business as opposed to Teams. And that's why I enable them with Teams only mode. That's a very easy way to explain. The last scenario that we will talk about is, what about Link? So it's actually quite simple for Link. I would build you exactly what I just showed you before. So for Link, or to connect to Office 365, you need a Skype for Business Edge server for the communication to Office 365, just like you've seen. But you can't pair the Link front end to a Skype Edge. So I would create you the smallest, all-encompassing Skype for Business environment and then decommission it once it's all done. So it would literally look like just the exact same. It would sit in the same topology. And if you wanted to have the user actually moved up to Teams, you'd move them from your Link pool to your Skype for Business pool, and then they would use that federation route up there to Teams. And that's how you'd get your users moved up there. And then once everything is done, you can decommission your whole Link estate, decommission your whole Skype for Business estate, keep the SBC as your direct routing, or if you approach the direct routing provider, you can essentially even get their SBC and just port the numbers over to the direct routing provider. It's a very straightforward way to do things. So, to summarise, regardless of where you're migrating from, or your migration scenario and how you want to get there will always be a solution for yourself. Teams isn't just a simple turnkey solution, it can be really flexible if you need it to. That, in short, is the end of the presentation. Thank you for listening. If you want now, we can go out to the breakout room. If you have any questions about where you're coming from as a business and how you want to get direct routing, then please feel free to ask me. Or if you have any other general questions around Teams, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Callum. I'm going to go ahead. Let me get the link for the post-breakout session. This is your opportunity. If anyone has a question that you'd like to ask, go ahead. You can do that now. We'll give you just a moment. Okay. Well, I guess that's all the time we have for this session. If you'd like to talk with Callum, follow this session. You can find them in the breakout area. And thank you so much for watching. And Callum, thank you for the wonderful presentation.
Perfect. Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Mama, you understand that? Well, like I gotta understand how you can, cause like I've been to, Paris, Beirut, I mean, Iraq, Iran, Eurasia, I speak very, very fluent Spanish. Todo está bien, chévere. 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 Is that right, mama? Yeah, 'cause I got my shaking room.